Help! Someone please! My wheelchair! An elderly man lay in the rain on a San Francisco street, his wheelchair overturned in oil. Dozens of tech workers in expensive suits stepped over him without looking down once. Sarah Jenkins had 20 minutes to reach her job interview, the one that would save her dying father. She watched her bus arrive, then watched the old man struggling alone in the gutter. She turned her back on the bus and ran to help the stranger instead. What she didn't know was George Kennedy wasn't homeless. He was Silicon Valley's silent billionaire king. And the CEO who would steal her life's work had just made George's enemy list forever. Before watching, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. The rain in San Francisco wasn't just weather. It was a wall of freezing water. Sarah Jenkins stood at the bus stop, shielding her cheap polyester interview suit with yesterday's newspaper. The fabric was already soaking through, cold water seeping down to her skin beneath. She checked her Chronos knockoff watch, the kind that cost $15 at a corner store. 19 minutes until her interview at Tech Dominate, the junior developer position that meant everything. The job came with health insurance, the kind that covered experimental cancer treatments for dying fathers. Her father had 20 days of medication left, maybe less if his condition worsened overnight. Please, let the bus be on time, she whispered into the storm. Her breath came out visible in the cold November air, mixing with the rain. Across the street, a wheelchair hit a slick patch of motor oil on the wet pavement. The old man sitting in it, frail and completely soaked, tipped sideways in terrible slow motion. Metals scraped against concrete as the chair crashed over, dumping him into the gutter. Someone help him! Sarah shouted across the street, but her voice was lost in the storm's roar. People in expensive Gore-Tex coats walked past, eyes locked on their phones, earbuds blocking reality. A woman in Prada heels stepped directly over the man's outstretched hand without breaking stride. Hello? He's hurt! Can someone call 911? Sarah screamed louder. Nobody stopped. Nobody turned. Nobody cared about the old man drowning in rainwater and oil. Her bus pulled up to the curb with a hydraulic hiss, warm and dry and safe. The doors opened, revealing the heated interior, the path to her father's survival. Sarah looked at the bus, then at the man struggling in the gutter across the street. She thought about her father's face this morning, the oxygen mask fogging with each labored breath. Go get that job, sweetheart, he'd whispered, his voice weak, but still her father's voice. Don't worry about me, you worry about your future. The bus driver looked at her expectantly, his hand hovering over the door close button. You getting on or what, lady? The driver asked, impatiently. Sarah looked at the old man again, his arm reaching up toward people who wouldn't see him. He was someone's father, too. Someone's grandfather. Someone who mattered to someone somewhere. She thought about what her father would do, the man who'd raised her to see people. Character is what you do when no one's watching, he always said. Her legs started moving before her brain finished, deciding, running across the street toward the fallen man. Wait, miss, your bus, the driver shouted, but Sarah was already gone. The bus doors closed behind her, taking her future with it, driving away into the rain. Sarah knelt in the oily puddle, ruining Heronly interview suit completely. I've got you, hold on, she cried, trying to lift the wheelchair by herself. The old man was heavier than he looked, and the chair was tangled in itself. My leg, I think it's twisted, the old man groaned, shivering violently from cold and shock. Sarah pulled at the chair but couldn't get the leverage, her hand slipping on wet metal. Suddenly, a hand in a tailored cuff grabbed at the other side of the wheelchair frame. On 3, a male voice said calmly through the rain. 1, 2, 3. Together, Sarah and the stranger hoisted the old man up and back into his seat. They wheeled him under a bus shelter, out of the worst of the downpour. The stranger was in his early 30s, sharp-looking, wearing an expensive suit now completely ruined. His Chronos watch, the real kind worth $20,000, was scratched from the wheelchair frame. Thank you, Sarah gasped, looking at him properly for the first time. I couldn't lift him alone. I'm Sarah. Michael, he replied, shaking her wet, oily hand without hesitation. "We need an ambulance," Michael said, checking the old man's twisted ankle carefully. "That's definitely sprained, maybe broken. He needs a hospital." Michael pulled out his phone, water dripping off the screen, and started to dial. "I have a pitch meeting with venture capital partners in 15 minutes, he muttered to himself. "It's my only shot. If I miss this, I'm done." Sarah looked at her own phone, saw the time, felt her stomach drop through the pavement. "And I have a final interview," Sarah admitted quietly. "The kind that doesn't reschedule. The kind that fills the position if you don't show." They looked at each other across the old man's wheelchair, two strangers sharing the same impossible choice. Michael looked at his phone, then at the shivering old man, then back at Sarah. "He can't wait," Sarah said firmly, making the decision for both of them. "I know," Michael sighed, pressing the call button for 911. They stayed with George. The old man had whispered his name between shivers for 40 long minutes. The ambulance took forever to arrive because of the storm, because of traffic, because nothing was easy. By the time the paramedics loaded Georgine to the back, both their phones were buzzing angrily. Sarah read her email first, her heart sinking with every word on the screen. "Position filled due to no-show. Thank you for your interest in Tech Dominate." Michael read his text message, his face going pale under the rain washing down his cheeks. "Client walked. Don't bother coming back. Your desk is being cleared. Management." They stood under the bus shelter together, soaking wet, covered in oil, and completely unemployed. Sarah felt tears mixing with the rain on her face, but she couldn't tell which was which. Her father had 20 days of medication left, and she'd just thrown away his only chance. "I'm Sarah Jenkins," she said again, offering her muddy hand like they were meeting for the first time. "Michael Ross." He smiled sadly, shaking it again with a grip that felt like understanding. "Nice to meet a fellow idiot." 3 months later, the idiots were partners, working out of a cramped corner table at Cafe Velocity. They shared a single blueberry muffin between them because that's all they could afford that morning. Sarah coded on a refurbished laptop she'd bought at a pawn shop for $80. Michael cold-called potential clients on a cracked iPhone. He'd dropped twice trying to juggle too much. Around them, tech entrepreneurs with venture capital money ordered $15 lattes without thinking. "CareLink is ready," Sarah announced, spinning the laptop screen toward Michael with pride in her eyes. The interface glowed on the screen, simple and clean and beautiful in its efficiency. "What does it do?" Michael asked, leaning forward to study the code she'd written. "It connects caregivers to excess medical supplies in real time," Sarah explained, her voice gaining energy. "Hospitals waste 40% of supplies because of poor inventory management and communication failures. Families like mine pay full price for equipment that's sitting unused 3 blocks away. This app cuts waste and lowers costs for families who can't afford to watch their parents die." Michael stared at the screen, his salesman eyes seeing not just code but possibility. "Sarah, this is brilliant," he said, genuine away in his voice. "This isn't just an app. This is a movement. I can sell this to everyone." They hustled for 12 weeks straight, sleeping 4 hours a night, believing when nobody else did. Sarah wrote code until her eyes burned and her fingers cramped into permanent keyboard position. Michael made 300 cold calls, got rejected 297 times, never stopped smiling. Slowly, like water finding cracks in concrete, the app gained traction in local nursing homes. The owner of Mercy Care Home in Oakland called them personally to say thank you. "You saved Mrs. Patterson's family $6,000, the owner said on the phone, crying. "They can keep her home now, instead of choosing between medicine and rent." Sarah put the phone down and cried too, the first time in 3 months that felt like hope. Michael watched her, then picked up his phone again and started dialing the next 100 numbers. Then, on a Tuesday morning in February, the call came that would change everything forever. "Victor Sterling wants a meeting," Michael gasped, covering his phone with his hand, eyes wide. Victor Sterling was the CEO of Sterling Tech, the shark who'd eaten every small startup for breakfast. He was worth $800 million, had been featured on the cover of Forbes 3 times. 2 days later, they walked into his glass tower office, feeling small and out of place. The building was all sharp angles and cold surfaces, designed to make visitors feel inferior. Victor's office occupied the entire top floor, windows overlooking San Francisco like a kingdom. His desk was minimalist white marble, positioned on a raised platform so he literally looked down on visitors. Sarah and Michael sat in low, uncomfortable chairs clearly designed to make them feel powerless. Victor sat behind his throne desk, wearing a black turtleneck that cost more than their monthly rent. He didn't stand up when they entered, didn't offer his hand, just looked at them like specimens. "So, you're the kids making noise," Victor said, his voice dripping with concealed contempt. Sarah straightened in her uncomfortable chair, trying to project confidence she didn't feel inside. "We're here to pitch CareLink, our healthcare resource allocation platform," she began. "It's a platform built on compassion, designed to help families access." "Cut the hippie talk," Victor interrupted, waving his hand like swatting a fly. "Does it scale? Can it make money? Or is this another change the world startup that dies in 6 months? Sarah bristled at his tone, but forced herself to stay calm and professional. "It scales. We have 43 nursing homes using it, and demand is growing exponentially every week." Victor leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued for the first time since they'd entered. "Did you write this code, sweetheart?" he asked, his eyes on Sarah with open skepticism. "Or did you hire a freelancer in India to do the actual work?" Sarah felt her face flush with anger, but kept her voice level and steady. "I wrote every single line myself," she said through clenched teeth. Victor smiled, but it was the smile of a predator seeing weakness and prey. "Impressive. For a coffee shop girl," he said, the insult wrapped in faint praise. "Tech requires logic, not feelings. Can you really handle the pressure when things get difficult?" Michael jumped in, trying to redirect the conversation away from Victor's condescension. "I handle sales and partnerships. We're a team. We've built something special here together." Victor looked at Michael like he'd just noticed a piece of furniture had spoken. "And you're the salesman? Selling what, exactly? Hope? Dreams? Rainbows?" Victor laughed at his own joke, a dry sound without any real humor in it. "I'm offering to buy you out," Victor said suddenly, sliding a paper across the desk. $200,000. Cash, today. Sign and walk away with more money than you've ever seen." Sarah and Michael looked at each other, communicating silently across the space between their chairs. $200,000 would cover their debts, pay Sarah's father's medical bills for a year. "That covers our debts, but what happens to the mission?" Michael asked cautiously. "What happens to the families who need this?" Victor's smile widened, showing teeth that had been professionally whitened to an inhuman brightness. "I'll take the mission from here. You two are, well, let's be honest, you're amateurs. You've done good work for beginners, but this needs professional management to reach its full potential. I have the resources, the connections, the vision to make this into something truly revolutionary." Michael leaned forward, his instinct screaming that something was wrong with this entire situation. "We need time to read the contract," Michael said, reaching for the thick document. Victor's expression hardened into something cold and final, all pretense of friendliness evaporating instantly. "Sign now, or I crush you," Victor said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I have lawyers who eat dreams for breakfast. I will bury you in litigation you can't afford. I will call every investor in this valley and tell them you're difficult, unstable, not worth touching. You'll never work in tech again. You'll be coding HTML for dentist websites in Nebraska." He slid the contract closer, the paper making a soft sound on the marble surface. "This is a standard partnership agreement. You get money, I get the technology, everyone wins." Sarah looked at Michael, her mind racing with calculations she didn't want to make. Her father had 12 days of medication left now, maybe less if his condition was worsening. The nursing home had called yesterday asking about payment, their voices getting impatient and cold. "We can use the resources to help more people," Sarah rationalized out loud, wanting to believe it. "We can scale faster with his connections. Reach more families, save more lives." Michael's jaw was tight, his salesman instincts screaming that this was a trap. But he looked at Sarah's desperate eyes and knew they had no other options left. "Okay," Michael said quietly, picking up the pen with a hand that wasn't quite steady. They signed on the indicated lines, their signatures sealing their fate in blue ink. Victor smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes at all, didn't touch any part of his face. "Welcome to the family," he said, pulling the contract back across the desk immediately. "Now get out of my office. I have real work to do." The launch party for Sterling Care wastes the event of the season in San Francisco's tech scene. 500 of the Valley's elite packed into the Sterling Tech headquarters atrium in designer clothes. Champagne flowed from fountains made of crystal. Waiters circulated with caviar on gold-plated trays. Sarah and Michael stood in the back of the crowd, wearing rented formal wear that didn't quite fit. Sarah's dress was slightly too large, borrowed from a rental shop that catered to proms. Michael's tuxedo was slightly too small, the sleeves ending an inch above his wrists. They waited nervously for their names, Tobe called as co-founders, as partners, as promised. On stage, Victor basked in spotlight that seemed designed specifically to make him look like a god. He held a glass of scotch that cost more than Sarah's monthly rent, swirling it casually. "I had a vision," Victor's voice boomed through the sound system. "A vision of saving our elderly, of bringing dignity back to American healthcare, of using technology not just to make money, but to make meaning." The massive screen behind him lit up, displaying lines of code that Sarah recognized instantly. It was her code, her architecture, her comments still visible in the margins of the display. "And tonight, after 2 years of development, I give you the Sterling algorithm." The crowd erupted in applause, investors cheering like Victor had just cured cancer itself. Sarah felt something cold and terrible settling in her stomach as she watched the screen. "Wait," Sarah whispered to Michael, gripping his arm tightly. "Where are our names? Michael, where are our names on the credits?" She scanned the massive screen desperately, looking for Sarah Jenkins or Michael Ross anywhere. The credits scrolled past. Lead developer Victor Sterling. Lead designer Victor Sterling. Founder Victor Sterling. Nothing. They were erased, deleted, made invisible. Sarah pushed through the crowd, Michael following close behind, both of them moving toward the stage. "Victor, you promised!" Sarah shouted over the applause, her voice cracking with betrayal. The entire atrium went silent instantly, 500 faces turning to look at the commotion. Victor looked down at Sarah from his position on stage, like she was an insect interrupting his moment. "Security, why is there a hysterical woman interrupting my presentation?" Victor asked calmly. "You stole our work. You signed a partnership agreement," Michael yelled, holding up his phone. "We have the contract. You promised us co-founder status and profit sharing." Victor laughed, a dry, cruel sound that echoed through the silent atrium perfectly. "Read the fine print, son." Victor gestured to the massive screen, and THE contract appeared, specific clauses highlighted in red. Section 12, Paragraph 4. All intellectual property rights transfer fully and permanently to Sterling Tech. You sold me the technology for $200,000. It's mine now, legally, completely. "That's fraud," Sarah cried, tears of purage streaming down her face now. "You told us it was a partnership. You lied to us." Victor's expression shifted to something that looked almost like pity, but wasn't, not really. "It's business, sweetheart," Victor corrected, his voice patronizing and smooth. "And frankly, no one in this room believes a girl like you could have invented this algorithm." He gestured to Sarah's cheap dress, her awkward posture, her emotional face streaked with tears. "Look at her. Emotional. Unstable. Hysterical. This is exactly why women struggle in tech. They can't separate feelings from logic." The crowd murmured, heads nodding, swaying to Victor's confident narrative like hypnotized sheep. Sarah felt the room turning against her, felt reality being rewritten in real time. Tech requires cold logic, not tears, Victor declared to the crowd. Maybe you should try a different industry, something more suited to your temperament. Escort them out, Victor ordered the security guards who had materialized from the shadows. And make sure they understand that if they ever speak publicly about this, I will destroy them. I will sue them for slander, for defamation, for everything they have and everything they'll ever have. 2 large security guards grabbed Sarah and Michael by their arms, gripping them firmly, but not gently. They were dragged backward through the crowd, as Victor continued his speech like nothing had happened. Now, as I was saying before that unfortunate interruption, Sterling Care represents the future. Sarah and Michael were pushed out the back service door into an alley behind the building. It was raining again, just like the day they'd met, history repeating itself but darker this time. They stood in the alley as the door locked behind them with a final, decisive click. Sarah's phone buzzed in her small rental purse, the vibration loud in the sudden silence. She pulled it out with shaking hands, already knowing what the notification would say. Miss Jenkins, your payment for your father's care was declined. You have 24 hours to arrange payment or we must transfer him to county facility. Sarah's legs gave out and she collapsed onto the wet pavement, sobbing into her hands. I failed him, Michael. I failed my dad. I failed everyone who needed this app. I believed Victor. I trusted him. I'm so stupid. Michael knelt beside her, wrapping his rented tuxedo jacket around her shaking shoulders. He stole the code, Sarah. But he didn't steal us, Michael said fiercely. We're still here. We're still breathing. We still know the truth. We find a way. We always find a way. But Sarah couldn't hear hope anymore, couldn't see past the crushing weight of her failure. Above them, through the glass walls of the building, they could see Victor toasting his success. The next week was a blur of closed-door sand hung-up phone calls that all sounded the same. Victor had blacklisted them with every investor, every company, every contact in the entire valley. They're difficult, he'd told everyone who mattered. Emotional, unstable, tried to steal my work and claim credit, not trustworthy. No one would take a meeting, no one would return calls, no one would even acknowledge their emails. They were erased from Silicon Valley as completely as their names had been erased from CareLink. Sarah's apartment was filled with cardboard boxes now, everything she owned packed for the eviction. Her father was sleeping in the bedroom, confused about why they were moving, asking questions she couldn't answer. We have $12, Michael said, counting coins on Sarah's kitchen table. He separated quarters from dimes with methodical precision, like organization could solve their problems. We need a lawyer, Sarah said, staring at the wall without really seeing it. We need a miracle, Michael corrected, his voice flat with exhausted defeat. There was a knock at the apartment door, firm and professional, 3 measured strikes. Sarah and Michael looked at each other with dread, thinking it was the landlord or another process server. Michael opened the door carefully, expecting another piece of bad news to add to the collection. Instead, a man in a perfectly tailored tuxedo stood in the hallway, completely out of place. Miss Sarah Jenkins? Mr. Michael Ross? The man asked in a refined British accent. Yes? Sarah stood up, immediately wary of another trap, another scam, another Victor. My employer requests your presence. The away car is waiting downstairs. We don't have money for a car, Michael said defensively, his hand still on the door. The ride is paid for, sir, the butler smiled warmly. And I assure you, my employer's intentions are entirely benevolent. Sarah and Michael exchanged a look that said, what do we have to lose without words? They walked down to the street, where a Luxor Phantom limousine waited at the curb. The car was black and impossibly long, the kind that politicians and celebrities rode in. Confused but completely out of options, they slid into the leather back seat. The car drove them out of Sarah's shabby neighborhood, out of the city, up into the hills. They climbed higher into Palo Alto's exclusive neighborhoods, where tech billionaires built their kingdoms. The mansions got larger, the gates got real, the distance between houses stretched into acres. Finally, the Luxor turned into a driveway that was longer than the street Sarah had grown up on. At the end of the driveway stood a mansion of glass and steel, modern architecture overlooking the valley. Every window was lit from within, warm light spilling out into the evening darkness. The butler led them through a marble entryway into a library that smelled of old leather and older money. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling, first editions mixed with new releases. A fire crackled in a fireplace large enough to stand in, warmth filling the enormous room. Sitting by the fireplace in a high-tech wheelchair, looking healthy and clean, was George. The homeless man from the rain, the stranger they'd saved 3 months ago. He was clean-shaven now, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than their car. His wheelchair was sleek and modern now, clearly custom-made with technology they'd never seen. "Hello, my rainy day friends," George said, his voice warm and strong and completely transformed. Sarah's mouth fell open, unable to process what she was seeing, unable to make it make sense. "George?" she gasped, taking a step forward like approaching something from a dream. You live here? This is your house?" "I do. Or rather, I hide here," George chuckled, the sound rich and genuine. "Allow me to properly reintroduce myself. I am George Kennedy." Michael's jaw actually dropped, his face going pale with sudden recognition and understanding. "Kennedy Ventures? The godfather of Silicon Valley? You're George Kennedy?" "The very same," George nodded, clearly enjoying their shock. "But why were you on the street?" Sarah asked, still unable to reconcile the two Georges. "Why were you in the rain? Why were you alone?" George wheeled himself closer to them, his expression becoming serious and thoughtful. "I like to test people," George admitted without shame or apology. "I wanted to see if humanity still existed in this valley of wolves and predators. I've watched this industry become colder, more ruthless, more focused on disruption than compassion. I wanted to know if anyone would stop for a stranger, for someone with nothing to offer in return." He looked at both of them with eyes that held decades of watching, of learning, of knowing. "And you two were the only ones who stopped that day. 47 people walked past me, 47 people with money and power and connections. But you stopped. You sacrificed your futures for a stranger you'd never met and would never see again." Sarah felt tears starting again, but different tears this time, not tears of despair. "I heard about what Victor did," George said, his voice hardening into something cold and sharp. "He didn't just steal from you, he insulted my judgment. He betrayed people I had blessed with my trust." George pressed a button on his wheelchair's armrest, and a holographic display appeared in the air. Documents and emails materialized, floating in three-dimensional space, like evidence from a crime scene. "This is the original timestamp of your code," George said, pointing to metadata on the screen. "Registered to your laptop ATO 300 hours on November 14th of last year." He swiped his hand, and another email appeared, this one from Victor's private account. "And this is Victor's internal email to his legal team, sent 2 days after you signed." The email read, "The girl is a coding genius. Patent everything under my name immediately. Bury her legal team if she fights. She has no money for lawyers. Easy win." "How did you get this?" Michael whispered, stunned by what he was reading. George smiled, a smile that contained decades of accumulated power and connections. "I still have friends on his board, friends who owe me favors, friends who remember loyalty, and I have better hackers than Victor will ever be able to afford or find." "This proves intent to defraud," Sarah said, her legal knowledge from community college clicking into place. "It proves he is a criminal," George corrected, gently but firmly. George picked up a leather checkbook from the side table, one with his name embossed in gold. He wrote carefully, his handwriting elegant despite his age and condition. "I am investing $50 million in CareLink," George announced calmly. "Full funding. Full support. Everything you need to build this properly and help everyone who needs it. Sarah felt her knees go weak. The number too large to process, too impossible to be real. But we don't have the company anymore, Sarah said, her voice small and defeated. Victor owns it. He owns the code. He OWNS everything. George's smile widened into something that looked almost predatory, almost dangerous. We are going to take it back, George said simply. Tomorrow is the Global Tech Summit. 10,000 attendees. Live broadcast to 5 million viewers worldwide. Victor Sterling is the keynote speaker. He's going to present Sterling Care to the entire world. I think it's time for a surprise guest appearance, don't you? He handed Sarah the check, the paper so light but carrying the weight of everything she'd lost. Buy a new suit, Sarah. A real one. You're going to be a CEO. Sarah looked at the check, then at George, tears streaming down her face now without shame. Why? She asked, her voice breaking with the weight of the question. Why are you doing this for us? We're nobody. We're nothing. George reached out and took her hand. His grip, surprisingly strong for someone so old. Because kindness is the ultimate algorithm, George said, quoting her own pitch back to her. Because compassion scales better than cruelty ever will. And because it's time the good guys finished first for once, in this godforsaken valley. The Global Tech Summit filled the Moscone Center with 10,000 tech leaders, investors, and innovators. The keynote stage was massive, with screens 3 stories tall broadcasting to millions watching online. Victor Sterling stood in the spotlight, looking like the undisputed king of the entire technology world. He wore his signature black turtleneck, his arms spread wide like a messiah, addressing his followers. Sterling Care is the future of healthcare, Victor shouted, his voice amplified to godlike proportions. We will revolutionize how America treats its elderly. We will bring dignity back to aging. The audience applauded wildly, investors already calculating returns, reporters already writing headlines. Suddenly, the massive screen behind Victor flickered once, the image distorting briefly. Victor didn't notice, too caught up in his moment of triumph to pay attention to technical details. The Sterling Tech logo glitched, pixel scrambling, then vanished completely from the 3-story display. In its place, an email appeared, blown up 50 feet tall for everyone in the arena to read. The girl is a coding genius. Patent everything under my name immediately. Bury her legal team if she fights. The crowd gasped collectively, 10,000 people inhaling at once, the sound like wind through trees. Victor spun around, confusion crossing his face, then horror as he read his own words. Technical difficulties. Cut the feed immediately, Victor screamed at the tech crew in the wings. Someone cut the damn feed. Get that off the screen now. We can't, sir. We're locked out of the system, the lead engineer yelled back in panic. Someone's hijacked our entire network. We have no control. The stage lights turned blood red, bathing Victor in crimson light like judgment from above. A second email appeared on the screen, this one even more damaging than the first. Blacklist Jenkins and Ross with all investors. Tell everyone they're unstable, difficult, not worth the risk. Eliminate the competition permanently. The crowd's gasps turned to angry murmurs, the sound of a mob beginning to turn. From the back of the enormous auditorium, the main doors swung open with a crash. Sarah walked in, wearing a tailored suit that actually fit, her head held high with confidence. Michael walked beside her, equally well-dressed, no longer looking like amateur children. And between them, George Kennedy rolled in his high-tech wheelchair, visible for the first time in 5 years. That's George Kennedy, someone shouted from the crowd. Oh my God, that's actually George Kennedy. He hasn't been seen in public since 2019. Reporters turned their cameras instantly, flashbulbs exploding like stars, the entire arena pivoting to watch. Sarah walked down the center aisle slowly, every eye in the arena locked on her progression. Victor backed away from the microphone, trapped in the red spotlight, nowhere to run or hide. You can't be here, Victor stammered, his confidence cracking like thin ice. Sarah walked up the stairs to the stage, her footsteps echoing through the sound system. She took the microphone from Victor's limp hand without asking permission or waiting for him to surrender. "You're right, Victor. I shouldn't be here," Sarah said, her voice calm and clear and powerful. "I should be bankrupt. I should be invisible. I should be exactly where you tried to bury me." The crowd was completely silent now, thousands of people holding their collective breath. "But you forgot one thing." She pointed to the massive screen, where lines of her original code were now displayed. "You forgot that the truth always compiles." The tech crowd got the metaphor immediately, understanding dawning across thousands of faces at once. "This code is my signature, my style, my soul. And you can't steal a soul, Victor. You cannonly expose your own." FBI agents walked onto the stage from both wings, their badges visible on their suits. "Victor Sterling, you are under arrest for corporate espionage, fraud, and theft of intellectual property." The lead agent pulled out handcuffs, the metal clicking shut around Victor's wrists. As they cuffed him, Victor looked desperately at George, his face twisted with rage and fear. "You set me up, old man!" Victor spat, struggling against the agents holding him. "You orchestrated this whole thing, this ice entrapment." George wheeled forward slightly, his expression peaceful and satisfied, like justice finally served. "I just corrected a bug in the system, Victor," George said calmly. "You taught me 20 years ago when you stole from me. Always check your code for vulnerabilities. You left one. It was called arrogance." The agents led Victor off stage as he screamed about lawyers and lawsuits and conspiracies. Sarah turned to face the stunned audience, the 10,000 faces still processing what they'd witnessed. "This technology belongs to the caregivers," Sarah announced to the silent arena. "It belongs to the families who can't afford to watch their parents die. And starting today, CareLink is free for every family in America who needs it." The applause wasn't polite this time, wasn't obligatory, wasn't corporate. It was thunderous, genuine, the sound of people recognizing real justice when they saw it. 5 years later, a ribbon-cutting ceremony drew a crowd to the new Jenkins Care Center. The building was beautiful, modern but warm, designed to look like a home rather than an institution. Sarah stood at the podium, looking radiant in professional clothes that were actually hers now. Michael stood beside her, holding their 2-year-old daughter Emma, who giggled at the cameras. George sat in the front row in his wheelchair, looking proud like a grandfather at a graduation. Sarah's father sat next to George, healthy and strong, 5 years of experimental treatment having worked. "We built this not for profit, but for people," Sarah said into the microphone. She looked at her father, at Michael, at George, at everyone who had believed when it was hardest. "We learned that 25 minutes of kindness in the rain can change an entire lifetime. We learned that compassion scales better than cruelty, even though cruelty seems faster at first. We learned the good guys can finish first, but only if they refuse to give up." She looked directly at the camera, knowing millions were watching online across the country. If you're watching this and you're struggling against someone more powerful than you, if someone stole your work, your dream, your hope, remember, the truth always compiles. It might take time, but it always compiles. She cut the ribbon with scissors Michael handed her, and the crowd erupted in applause. The California sun was shining bright and warm, no clouds in the perfect blue sky. There was no rain today, just light and warmth and the promise of better things ahead. Sarah picked up Emma from Michael's arms and kissed her daughter's forehead gently. "Your grandmother would be proud," her father said, tears in his eyes. "I'm proud," George added, reaching up to squeeze Sarah's free hand warmly. "You saved my life that day in the rain. Now you're saving thousands." The camera pulled back slowly, showing the entire scene, the new center, the families helped, the future built. The building's sign read, Jenkins Care Center, where compassion scales. And beneath it, smaller letters, founded by Sarah Jenkins and Michael Ross. Funded by George Kennedy. Built by people who stopped in the rain. The screen faded slowly to white, leaving only the echo of applause and the promise of justice. Do you think Sarah should have revealed her identity sooner, Or was she right to wait for George's plan? Have you ever been underestimated because of your job, your age, or your appearance? Would you have had the courage to sacrifice your critical interview to help a stranger in the rain? Should there be stronger legal protections for startup founders against predatory investors like Victor? Have you ever met someone who tested you without you knowing it, like George tested Sarah? If this story reminded you that kindness is the ultimate algorithm and justice eventually compiles, please like and subscribe. We bring you stories of karma, courage, and the truth that good guys can finish first. See you in the next story.